All right. Well, hello everyone. We're excited so many people from across the country could join us today as we watch and discuss the documentary Torn Apart, Separated at the Border. This presentation is the fourth installment of a four-part e-learning series done in conjunction with our annual Big Hearted campaign, which I'll share more about later. But for now, my name is Sophie Lavelle, and I'm the Development Associate for Atlanta office, and I'll be moderating the presentation and discussion today. A quick thank you to everyone in our Atlanta market who participated in the restaurant promotion accompanying tonight's event. For those of you who don't know, Doc Che's Morningside is offering 25% of the proceeds back to our office for all the takeout orders who mentioned Tahare. So if you're hungry and in Atlanta, it's not too late to order. Here's a quick overview of our time together. We'll start off with some introductions, kick off our discussion of the film, host a Q&A period where we'll answer questions that you all have, and finally, we'll wrap up with some takeaways. As I mentioned, we'll be hosting a Q&A period closer to the end of today's event. Please use the chat bar to share any questions that you have throughout. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. Also, we'll be sharing a recording of this event with you all tomorrow. Now, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our incredible panel for today. First, we'll start with Elika Runitan, a Tahare volunteer and friend of Yesvi. Elika is in her last year at Arizona State University studying political science and gender studies. Elika's family graciously hosted tonight's featured client, Vilma, and her daughter Yesvi at their home when they reunited after an 8-month separation. Elika and her family supported Vilma and Yesvi by creating a safe and loving environment for them to reconnect and heal. Her family also assisted in supporting their everyday needs, along with organizing legal meetings, dental appointments, and school support. Above all, she and her family have sustained a meaningful, lifelong bond with Vilma and Yesvi. After her experiences with them, Elika plans on taking her LSAT and pursuing immigration law following graduation. Let's all welcome Elika.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we're joined by Tahare pro bono partner, Brian McGrath. Brian is an associate at the New York office of Crowell and Mooring LLP, where he focuses on international trade work. A former educator, Brian works on a broad array of pro bono matters, including representing asylum seekers, litigating on behalf of veterans seeking disability benefits, voting rights litigation, and advising nonprofits on trade-related matters. Let's all welcome Brian.
Thank you for having me.
Last but not least, we're joined by Tahare pro bono partner, Jared Levine. Jared is counsel at the New York office of Crowell and Mooring LLP, where he focuses on complex commercial litigation. Jared maintains an extensive pro bono immigration docket and was recently recognized by the National Law Journal as a 2020 immigration law trailblazer in connection with his work for Tahare and the Catholic Legal Immigration Network. Jared also serves as the Impact Litigation Fellow at Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation, where he focuses on representing low-income tenants in impact litigation designed to expand access to affordable rent and stabilized housing. Let's welcome Jared.
Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you all so much for being here with us today. Tonight, we're diving into the film Torn Apart, Separated at the Border, produced and directed by Academy Award-winning documentarian Ellen Gusenberg-Kent. This film is available to watch in its entirety on HBO. The film profiles two families, Maria and Alex, and Vilma and Yesvi. Vilma is a client of Tahare, and because we can speak more to her case, we will focus on her and her daughter's journey as they navigate the 2018 family separation crisis, where more than 3,000 families were separated at the US-Mexico border. The journey they faced was difficult, and their pathway to safety is still ongoing. Through this, they remain resilient. I want to start us off with a trigger warning. The presentation and associated clips will include vivid descriptions of trauma, including child trauma. Instead of showing the entire film, we have decided to show brief clips that each presenter will speak to. Our themes this evening are navigating the legal process, holistic lawyering, and finally, culturally competent volunteerism. Our hope in showing this film is to shed light on the realities of family separation, the legal process, and the work we do at Tahare, and finally, to center on client stories. Though Vilma and Yesvi are not physically here with us, this film showcases their voices and stories. It's our goal to uplift their voices as best as we can. We're going to start off with an introductory clip of the film, and then we'll move into our discussion. Our discussion is going to begin with a look at the legal process encountered in their journey. Jared will speak to this process following our next clip. In this clip, we meet Vilma and Yesvi in Osceola, Georgia, after they've been reunited. After watching that clip, Jared, could you share a bit more about the legal backdrop and asylum that Vilma and Yesvi were up against? What type of challenges did you have to overcome in this case?
Sure. First of all, thanks again for having me here. I'm very happy to be here tonight. I got involved in Vilma's case in the fall of 2018 after she had already lost her initial merits hearing before an immigration judge in Atlanta. I was contacted by the incredible team of attorneys at Tahirih who knew I had experience and interest in handling complex immigration appeals. So with regard to the legal process, let me start by just kind of talking about some of the challenges that Vilma faced and that led to her losing her initial merits hearing. The first of these challenges was venue. And by that, I mean the physical geographic location of the court where her case was to be heard. Vilma was detained at a specific detention facility in Georgia that required her to have her hearing by appearing by video before the Atlanta Immigration Court. And the Atlanta Immigration Court is notorious as a place where the immigration judges are highly disinclined to grant any kind of asylum claim. To give you a bit more of color on that, the specific judge that Vilma's case was in front of has a denial rate, meaning the number of cases that he denies of more than 98%. So less than 2% of the cases that specific judge hears are actually granted asylum. And that's sort of commonplace for the immigration court in Atlanta. Just for context on that, I mean, if she had appeared in a New York immigration court, there are many judges in New York who grant more than 50, some in excess of 60 or 70% of the asylum claims that are in front of them. So for Vilma, like many other asylum seekers, the venue, really is dispositive and eventually ends up foreclosing the possibility of any kind of meaningful review of her asylum claim. The second challenge that Vilma faced was that she didn't have access to counsel. She didn't have an attorney who could appear for her in her merits hearing. And for anyone doing an asylum claim, that's a huge disadvantage. There have been a number of studies and reports on this, but in 2018, the Vera Institute released a report that people who were appearing without counsel were 12 times as likely to lose their merits hearing. So that would be a huge issue for anybody, but lack of counsel was a particularly big challenge for Vilma. Vilma had no formal education, she couldn't read or write, and she spoke a rare dialect of an indigenous language called Mon, which is spoken in certain parts of Guatemala, for which the court was unable to provide a competent interpreter. And of course, on top of all that, she was experiencing the trauma of being separated from her 11-year-old daughter. So in particular for Vilma, I mean, just not having an attorney was just devastating. Vilma was lucky in one regard. When she was temporarily detained in Texas for a bit, she got some assistance from a legal services provider who wasn't in a position to appear in her case, but did help her to gather evidence for her case. In particular, they helped prepare a written declaration from her, kind of detailing the decade of abuse that she'd suffered at the hands of her husband and the reasons that she had to flee Guatemala. They also helped her collect and prepare witness statements and other documents from Guatemala. But unfortunately, right before the hearing, about a week before the hearing, she was temporarily switched between detention facilities, and ICE took all of her possessions, including all the documents that had been prepared for her case. And they failed to return them to her in time for the merits hearing. So the hearing went on without documents or a proper interpreter. It was incredibly short and superficial, maybe about 10 minutes long. And it was really clear from the hearing transcript. I mean, the first thing I noted when I looked at the record, that Vilma clearly didn't understand what the questions were because the answer she was giving had no relationship to the question. And the judge was very frustrated by this, but didn't pick up on it as an issue that he should explore. Remarkably, despite the difficulties with the communication, Vilma was able to articulate that she had evidence and that it had been taken from her, but the judge either didn't hear that or just didn't care, didn't ask any follow-up questions, really didn't ask any meaningful questions throughout the very short proceeding. And instead, he just sort of proceeded to summarize what he understood from Vilma's testimony, which to his understanding was that she had had some kind of loud confrontation with her husband at some point in 2018, that there had been no physical violence involved, and that he proceeded to hold that because this wasn't the kind of extreme violence or death threats that amount to persecution, she didn't qualify for asylum. So those were sort of the challenges at the merits hearing stage. Now, in terms of the appeal, we faced the same kinds of challenges. The Board of Immigration Appeals has always been a difficult place to get meaningful review. It's gotten more so in the past several years as there have been a number of judges elevated to the Immigration Appeals Board who fit the same profile as the judge that Vilma had her case originally before. These are folks who, again, deny in excess of 90% of the asylum claims that they see. This appeal also presented some unique challenges. In particular, we had to get the board to understand that something really extraordinary had happened in this case. It wasn't just the routine appeal that they see so frequently. This was a situation where even in the world of immigration hearings, it couldn't be described as ordinary, much less anything amounting to a fair proceeding. So we put together a pretty compelling brief, which we were hopeful would be sufficient to persuade the board. And then something pretty unexpected happened, which was that as a result of the media campaign that Tahirih had been putting on around this case, we were contacted by the attorneys for the government in this case who let us know that they weren't going to oppose our appeal. So we filed the brief, noting that the appeal was unopposed, and the board ultimately granted our appeal and ordered a new hearing for Vilma.
Oh, wow. I mean, Jared, that's quite a journey. It sounds extremely complicated and complex, and I know we are happy that you were able to help shepherd Vilma through this process. Going through that alone sounds near impossible. I think we have just a minute or two, so I would love for us to quickly touch on this next question. So how do you think the recent election and change in administration could impact legal challenges for Vilma and other asylum applicants?
Yeah, so with respect to Vilma's case in particular, there's an additional legal challenge that she faced, which is that in June of 2018, the Attorney General at that time, Jeff Sessions, released a policy decision that was really designed to make it more difficult for people to qualify for asylum, and specifically people whose asylum claims were premised on domestic violence or gang violence. Those decisions were issued by the executive branch without changing the law, but what they did was effectively tell immigration judges that if you see a case involving domestic violence or gang violence, you should deny that claim. And there was a lot of litigation over that, which is still ongoing, but a lot of pieces of those policies remain in place. The good news is that because these policies were implemented by the executive branch without actually changing the law, they can be undone in the same way. And the Biden administration has indicated that they intend to reverse a lot of the policies that were put in place. There's a lot of hope in the immigrant rights community that those changes will be coming out soon. And that's a big deal for Vilma in particular because it means that she'll have one less challenge in her case when she does have a new hearing. And that change, in addition to many others that we are hoping are on the horizon, is a reason to be hopeful that in the future, individuals like Vilma will receive a more meaningful hearing on their asylum claims.
Thank you, Jared, for your insight and also these very deep explanations of this complicated process. If anybody has questions, follow-up questions, please place them in the chat and we'll address them during our Q&A session. Thanks again, Jared. Now we'll move into our discussion on holistic lawyering with Brian McGrath. At Tahereh, we firmly believe that our work with clients extends further than their legal needs. With the complexity of each case and situation, we're mindful of the need for social service support throughout our time with clients. It's for this reason we follow a holistic model where clients are paired with both our social services team as well as our legal services team. As a pro bono with Tahereh, they also follow a similar model, and Brian will speak more to that. At this point in the film, Vilma and Yesvi have moved and are living with Vilma's brother in rural Georgia. We'll look more at their lives following reunification and the challenges they continue to face. So this clip showed, as you said, a lot of issues outside of their legal case. Brian, can you speak more to what holistic lawyering is and how did you apply this approach in Vilma and Yesvi's case?
Sure, and thank you again for having me. I'm very happy to be here and glad this event is being put on. So personally, I view holistic lawyering very much as a humanistic approach to lawyering. And so this essentially requires that we look at the entire person and not just their particular legal claim. And so as we just saw in that clip, Vilma and Yesvi have not just their legal hurdles to overcome, but a number of significant other issues that are impacting their legal claim and their lives here in the United States all at the same time. And so they're all tangential issues, but very much connected to their legal claim. And so by using a holistic lawyering approach, it requires that we use a client-centered approach to collaborate and develop with our client to build a really harmonious relationship whereby we're meeting the needs of the entire client, not just their legal needs that need to be addressed. And so in Vilma and Yesvi's case, we've put this approach into practice a number of ways. And so if we step back for a moment and just sort of take a look, not at their claim, but their circumstances, we can see how their needs and our ability in our through Tahereh and the services that they offer and the legal representation that Vilma is receiving, how these issues can be addressed. So stepping back for a moment, for example, they're now, for a couple of years now, in an entirely different country where they're facing unfamiliar systems, unfamiliar hurdles every day, an unfamiliar language. As we saw, Vilma speaks excellent Spanish as a second language, and Yesvi in school is now learning English. But even just meeting basic language needs and being able to communicate their needs in their community can be a struggle at times. And so other issues that they've encountered include, for Vilma, finding legal employment just to meet their basic housing needs, to be able to put food on the table every single night, to make sure that Yesvi has the supplies that she needs to go to school, and under the current circumstances, of course, internet and safety supplies so that Yesvi remains safe throughout the pandemic. And these are all issues that don't even scratch on the surface of the psychological trauma that Vilma and Yesvi have both faced through the experiences that they've gone through. These are trauma that they're going to be dealing with for the rest of their lives, and that we can and we need to work with them as best we can to ensure that they feel confident being here, that they feel comfortable being here. As we saw from the clip, Vilma, and she's expressed this to me, very often lives in fear that at any moment they're going to be sent back to Guatemala, that her husband is going to find her, that Yesvi will be taken from her again. These are very, very deep scars that they are living with, and they're things that we cannot ignore. We cannot focus on Vilma as an asylum client. We need to look at Vilma and Yesvi as humans, and we need to learn and apply whatever sort of social services and support that we can give them, because not only is it, in my opinion, the right thing to do, but also because at the end of the day, if they are able to in some way address and meet these needs, it's going to make them more competent and more confident in their legal claim. It's going to make them feel more comfortable with the service support staff at Tahirih, with the legal representative that they're getting, so that they're more comfortable sharing information, and all that information is going to be valuable as we pursue their asylum claim back in court. And so it's just, in my opinion, it's an invaluable approach, and it's one that I'm very happy that Tahirih employs.
Thank you, Brian. You actually already started speaking to my next question, but if we can get, I guess, a bit more specific, what benefits do you feel like this approach brought to the case? And why do you feel that this type of approach should be used more broadly?
Sure. I kind of see a couple benefits here. And I just touched on one. And number one is, I think, the development of trust and the development of a relationship. For me, coming into this case, I'm a stranger speaking a strange language. They don't know me, and I showed up at Vilma's doorstep, and we had spoken on the phone, and she knew of me. But hi, I'm your attorney. Please tell me your life story and how you got here. And for anyone, that's a very difficult thing to do. And so if we're looking and treating Vilma the way that she wants to be treated and the way that she should be treated, by helping her to navigate all these different life hurdles that she's facing, she's going to start to develop trust in us. And that's absolutely invaluable to this kind of case, so that she feels more open sharing the trauma that she's experienced, sharing her journey in coming to the United States, so that we can use those experiences and use all of that data to make a more compelling and hopefully successful asylum claim. So I think the development of trust has been, for me, the most important thing in this particular case. And I feel like it should be used more broadly. I think it's just essential that we look at our clients as full humans. We really can't, in good conscience and as advocates, get a phone call and say, hey, I'm having trouble with A, B, and C. Is there anything you can do to help me? And say, no, sorry, that's not my role. I think that, it behooves us to really say, you know what, I don't know, but I know that I can find an answer, and I can find somebody who can help you with this. Or, I know Sophie at Tahirih mentioned this other thing. Let me get you in touch with her. And I think just it's necessary that we really try and help however we can through our guidance and advice and support to help Vilma and women like her seeking asylum to really rebuild their lives and to feel confident and comfortable here.
Thank you, Brian. I think that adds a lot of perspective to this type of approach. So thank you. I'm sure there are a lot of questions, follow-up questions from the audience. A quick reminder that they're all going to be addressed in our Q&A period. Just make sure you put them in our chat. And with that, we will head into our final theme for the evening, which is culturally competent volunteerism with Elika. With our clients hailing from all over the world, we're especially conscious of their needs and customs. We work to train our volunteers and advocates to do the same in order to ensure our clients feel comfortable and safe. We're going to jump back into the film and see Vilma and Yazvi when they were first reunited in Arizona and their immediate encounters following. Then Elika will speak to her experience with the family. So we have just seen a scene featuring you and your family. Can you speak a little bit more to what brought your family to work with Tahirih in this capacity, and what continues to drive your relationship with Yazvi?
Yes, so my family had been aware of the Tahirih Justice Center for many years prior to our encounter with Vilma and Yazvi, and had been contributing for quite a while. And my mom received an email basically stating that we need a family who can house these two people for the weekend, because Vilma and Yasvi were only meant to be there for a weekend, and anyone in the Phoenix area that can help. And we just immediately grabbed at the opportunity and offered our place. It ended up that they stayed for about 2 weeks, which was wonderful, and we got to get to know them better. And they truly, we had a language barrier. We had none of us speak Spanish. I learned Spanish for a few years in school, which was very subpar, but we somehow connected with the use of Google Translate, with different means of connection. We garnered a relationship that is like family. We will forever have a relationship with Vilma and Yasvi because they are forever a part of our family. Yasvi calls my mom Tia. It is very ingrained. They met our whole family. They are always going to be a part of our family. So, our continued relationship is implicit.
That's wonderful. And thank you again for taking on that opportunity. They happen so quickly, and so to have a family jump on is amazing. And reflecting on your experience, how do you think other community members can be involved in this work regardless of age or capacity? I know you're a college student, and I wonder what ways you may think other college students or people who are younger and may not think they have the dollars to contribute to these types of things.
Right. Obviously, like, resources are very important to some people. In Vilma and Yasvi's case, they come here with no one, with nothing. Vilma and Yasvi were lucky to have her brother living in Atlanta, so she has some familial connection here, but that is not the case with a lot of these cases. And I think one of the most important things that you can help contribute is mentorship and relationship building. We cultivated our relationship through different means, but one of the biggest ways was simply sitting down every night and having a meal with Vilma and Yasvi was very, very important to their adjusting to this new society, new world, really. And just a simple meal every night with the same people, saying grace before a meal, was very very much a source of reassurance, I think, for Vilma and Yasvi as well. And finding those relationships are extremely important. They're beneficial for the people who are not in that case as well, but also finding resources for individuals is extremely difficult when you don't speak the language, when you've never been here before. Finding medical resources, a religious community, something to bring a sense of normalcy, those things can be difficult to find. And by building those relationships, you can act as like a conduit for those people to help them find those resources and live a more comfortable life and adjust with more ease.
I have a final question for you. Our other panelists have spoken to a lot of the challenges that Vilma and Yasvi face, not just in their legal challenges, but also as far as the different social services needs they had, the language barriers that you also spoke to. I wonder, beyond those things, what other challenges did you face in creating a relationship with Yasvi? And well, I guess you've already talked about how you continue to cultivate that relationship, but if there's anything that you're doing that you think should be mentioned to maintain that relationship?
Yes, so obviously Vilma and Yasvi, when they arrived with a crew of cameras, and it was definitely visibly overwhelming for Yasvi especially, and that was sort of a challenge that was faced early on. She's, as spoken earlier, her and Vilma alike have undergone a great deal of trauma, and that trauma was very very visible and very you could pick up on it pretty quickly. And that night, the people from HBO attempted to interview Yasvi, but she just couldn't talk. It was just like a stream of tears. And it was either, you know, the first couple of days Yasvi was crying, or Yasvi was like extremely attached to her mother, which are both extremely understandable emotions to express in that case. But our relationship, you know, she was 11 at the time. I was 19. I was a young girl. You know, it was a lot easier to sort of cultivate a relationship between us, because when I was 11, I know I would have, you know, easily cultivated a relationship with like a older girl that's, you know, it's that age, and that was sort of easy. But sorry,
You're fine.
lost my train of thought. But so it was easier to gain that relationship. But what I really think is extremely important is trauma-based communication, and I think that was very important to gently sort of like opening up Yasvi and having her let go of sort of the extreme trauma that she was feeling at all times. And as you can see in the clip, like, you know, my dad didn't want to come forward and hug them at first, because you have to be aware of the situations that these individuals are coming from. You know, they came from a home of abuse from a man, and initially that could be overwhelming. So just gently sort of gaining that trust through being informed of these individuals' trauma at all times, and building a relationship aware of that. And we continue to cultivate our relationship. It's difficult with the distance. We Snapchat, but you know, me and my family, the first thing we're going to do as soon as, you know, hopefully quarantine is lifted and things are starting to get back to normal, is go to Georgia and visit them. And I know that we have a dream of one day, Vilma has a dream of one day going back to Guatemala and showing me and my family the places that she came from, and her family, and she still has a daughter back in Guatemala. So she wants us to meet those people, and obviously that is a long ways away, but we continue to talk about it.
Thank you, Alika. This has been extremely, not just informative, but it's amazing hearing about the connection that you guys created and all the different work that you continue to put into that relationship. We are quickly approaching the end of our event, so I'm going to jump into our Q&A session. Brian, Alika, and Jared, thank you again so much for sharing your time with us today. There are a couple questions in the chat that I'm going to share with you all, and I also invite participants to continue posting in the chat for any other questions you have. Because we have such short time, we may not get to everything, but we will, again, send a follow-up and try to reach as many things as we can today. For our first question, if I can pull it up, Jared, can you speak more to the difference between asylum seekers and refugees who come to the US? There's sometimes confusion about the two, just briefly.
Sure. So there's basically two different systems to get to come to the US as somebody who's fleeing violence in their home country. There's a refugee system, which is something I don't do work with, but where people outside of the country are able to apply to be resettled in the US. It's a very selective system. It's very difficult to get involved in it. The other avenue is through asylum, and that's people who actually physically present themselves at the border or cross over the border and come to the country, and then seek asylum at that stage. That's a system that's in place and enshrined in our laws. That's something that people are allowed to do. It's not a crime to come into the country and present yourself and seek asylum in that process.
Thank you, Jared. Our next question is for either Jared or Brian. And this is a question asking if there was access to any support from Georgia Access and Immigration Network, GAIN, that's a partner organization of Tahereh. And I know you guys, neither of you are Tahereh staff, so it's completely understandable if you don't have an answer to that question.
Yeah, I don't have insight into that question. I know personally, my partnership has been with Tahereh.
Okay. I'm a Tahereh staff member, and I can't speak specifically to this case, but I can say that we often do work together. Many of the immigration legal firms in Atlanta share cases and share insight with each other. So in other capacities we do, in this specific case, I don't know. And this question also again for either Brian or Jared, what connections or community building, or actually also for Elika, since you were working with them in the community, what connections or community building was essential to provide holistic services, meet the needs beyond their legal cases?
I'll start briefly. I can think of two instances, and again, not being Atlanta-based has made it more challenging to find community services down there. But I know that since, as we saw in the film, Vilma's brother lives in the community and has a established presence there. So some of the things that Vilma helped to establish at first through her brother were her religious network. I think she started attending, wherever her brother attended services, and that sort of helped to develop some personal relationships for her. And through that, she was able to initially obtain employment. And then one of the issues that's been ongoing is access to transportation. It's been challenging, particularly now where safety is an issue, for Vilma to adequately obtain transportation to and from work, grocery stores and other things like that. But developing those sort of relationships through her brother's connections and then the ones that she's made on her own through her religious network have been invaluable to her.
We also, when Vilma was here, got in contact with a representative of the Guatemalan government living in Arizona, and were able to find a Guatemalan church to take Vilma to, which was extremely important to her in many ways. Obviously, her religion is an extremely important part of her life, and having that connection again was very impactful for her, especially after 8 months of detention without a true religious outlet.
Thank you. Let me see, did we have any other questions in the chat? I don't think we do, which is actually perfect for timing. So I want to, for the last time, thank all of our presenters for spending time with us today, sharing more about the different aspects of not just Vilma and Yesvi's case, but about this process, about the work we do at Tahereh. And I know we've all benefited from hearing from the expertise each of you have, either personally or with your expertise in this field. So thank you so much again. Oh, and actually, I will open it up. If anybody has any parting words, we would love to hear any last statements, things that we didn't get to in our questions today. All right. Well, we've seen the clips, we've heard the discussions, and hopefully we've all concluded today's event feeling inspired. The question is, what now? This evening's call to action is for each of you to take a step in advocacy with Tahereh through volunteerism. Volunteering with Tahereh can look so many different ways, whether it's researching, translating, helping one of our teams. There's so many ways to get involved. If you're interested, please visit our website and fill out the volunteer form. We have a slide here showing exactly where you can find that information on our website. With our new virtual environment, we're also shifting our program. So if there is need and capacity, a Tahereh member of staff will contact you with more information for how you can be a best fit for our programming. Essentially, all that means is if there's a lag in any of the communications we have, it's not because we don't want your help, we're just trying to find the best place for you. Finally, as we mentioned at the beginning, this e-learning series is part of our annual Big Hearted campaign, which sustains our work, particularly during this time, and allows us to continue providing direct relief, representation, and support to survivors of violence in the immigrant communities we serve. We would love for you to visit our Big Hearted webpage and learn more about how you can donate, share, or start your own fundraiser. Every single dollar helps. As you can see, we have these great pro bonos, we have all these great volunteers, but in order to keep the work going, we still need your donations in dollars. We've completed our e-learning series and are so grateful for your support along the way. If you'd like to watch any of the events in the series, please check out our YouTube channel where you'll find recordings of all 4 events ranging from immigrant survivors in COVID-19 to recent threats to gender-based asylum. We'll thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate everyone on the call. Please feel free to reach out with any questions, and we hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you again for joining us.